Hello and welcome back to Frogboy X1 Gaming. I'm Andrew, and today I want to do something a little bit different. So if you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's get started with this. So I want to talk about what I think could possibly be the rise and fall of PlayStation. And we're going to go all the way back to as far as I can remember. And I mean, this isn't going to be like set in stone. I'm not going to be doing no researching or pulling anything up. This is just based on life experience and what I've seen and how I see the market going right now. I have worked in the gaming industry as in the retails. I was a manager for Game Crazy back in the early 2000s, so I've kind of seen some stuff, on that front a little bit that I'm going to kind of look at. So, all right, if we go back to 1994, the PlayStation, the original PlayStation was just about to launch. We already had like Super Nintendo, we had Sega Genesis, we had, the Sega 32, and then the the Sega CD, and then, the Saturn all coming out, kind of around that time and stuff. Saturn was a little bit less, not exactly, it was kind of a competitor to PlayStation, but at the other end, it was like Sega was just pumping out so many of these things that people were just like, oh man, they were getting a little tired of them. Well, the whole thing with Nintendo and PlayStation was supposed to create a disk drive for the Super Nintendo. There was going to be like an add-on feature like the Sega CD for Sega. So, if you're old enough and you remember back then. So, but let me draw your attention to this though, okay? Because back then, like Super Nintendo games, they were pretty expensive. They were expensive, like $59 to $69 up to $79 for these cartridges, and they were expensive to make, they were expensive to produce, and put them out and all of that stuff. So you were paying a premium back then for. It was a premium product. Those Super Nintendo cartridges were pretty strong, and then. And then you had Sony. They come out. They bring out the PlayStation. Those games were $49.99. Everything. Didn't matter what game it was. Didn't matter where it was made from. It was $49.99. So you were already getting a value for buying that game. And of course the Super Nintendo, or not the Super Nintendo, but the Nintendo 64 launched, like what was it? Like 94? It launched maybe a year after that, or a couple years after that. I think it was 96 when that launched, to be completely honest with you. So if I remember correctly, like 95, 96, something like that. It was pretty close to that time. Like Super Nintendo came out, and and then it was like the PlayStation and then the Super Nintendo, if I remember correctly. So, what happened is those came out with cartridges too, and they were still kind of expensive for the bigger name brand ones, but they tried to match that $49.99 price tag again with PlayStation. But then PlayStation was even a little more clever, and they did the PlayStation Greatest Hits, where they were $20, and it was harder for Nintendo to keep up with that, to try to keep costs low, and so you started seeing less content coming for the Nintendo 64, and you started seeing the PlayStation just flooded with content. So many games, so many developers. Activision started getting big. You had Capcom releasing games like Resident Evil, Activision doing stuff like Tenchu. You had Final Fantasy, like Parasite Eve 2. You had Square, Squaresoft back then. You had so many different freaking games coming out. You had Tomb Raider. You had just a bevy of games that were constantly just. It felt like back in PlayStation 1 days. It felt like you were getting bombarded with game after game after game. You had great like Gran Turismo. You had Need for Speed. You had Test Drive. You had, if you wanted a game, there was plenty to play. We had the amazing Castlevania Symphony of the Night, still my number one game to this day. I love that game, and PlayStation just took you places that, like, wow, look at all this. And there was just so much of it, so much coming so fast. And then we got the Dreamcast. And you would think that, like, the Dreamcast being that much better than the regular PlayStation, that, like, it would have just blown that thing away. Well, it did for a little while. It did. I mean, launching with games like Shenmue, like Shenmue, Blue Stinger. They had, what was that? Ready to Rumble boxing. It was pretty cool. They had Crazy Taxi. I mean, there was a lot of games that started coming out for that. You got like Resident Evil. You got Resident Evil, Code Veronica, stuff like that. Just these games that like came out with that really did start to be like, ooh man, these are pretty cool, man. Like this might actually go somewhere. And then boom, enter PlayStation 2. PlayStation 2 comes out and just sucks all the freaking air out of the whole room, out of everything. People were just amazed. This thing looked cool. It had a DVD player in there. There was, all this hype around the emotion engine and just all the other things that this PlayStation was supposed to be able to do. And they had Sony fresh off the hills of PlayStation 1 and the super success that console became. And PlayStation 2 took off, and it was going good. And then you had the regular Xbox come out. But here's what I'm saying. Then you had regular Xbox, and then you had the Nintendo Gamecube. And these three behemoths were going at each other. Nintendo, for some reason, with the most powerful console, like that GameCube was a pretty beefy console. But they come out with this little disc. This little disc that, like, if you wanted to play the Resident Evil remake, you had to have two discs. You had to play it until you got to a point and then put the other disc in there. And that was, inconvenient. I mean, I'm not saying that there wasn't other games on PlayStation that didn't have multiple discs, because gosh, like Final Fantasy games, those were all on 3 or 4 discs and stuff like that. But is what happened is once Xbox came out, Xbox really hit it off big in the United States. That was one of the best. Had that console had the Japanese support that the PlayStation 2 had, I think that would have been a completely different outcome for that generation. I think the Xbox would have took off and done a lot better that generation. The GameCube was where things started turning for Nintendo downward in terms of just not really catching on. And my honest opinion was that atrocious controller that came out with. I mean, not only did the 64 have a garbage controller, but the GameCube just as bad. Sony had the DualShock 2, and that controller was freaking great. Like, everybody loved it. It was easy to play with. And Microsoft launched with that big old giant controller, and the PlayStation 2 was, I think, the high point for PlayStation. And people might say the PlayStation 4, but I have a different take on that. I have a completely different idea on how that is. The PlayStation 4 was a good generation. Really good generation. It definitely pushed things in a different direction. But what you forget is the PlayStation 3, after I would say Uncharted 2 came out. Uncharted 2 kind of split things down the middle for PlayStation. From Uncharted 2 forward, PlayStation kind of started becoming, I would say Uncharted 2. That was like that big success. Yeah, we all remember PlayStation first party titles from, like PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 and whatever else. But I would say Uncharted 2 is where things started to get a little bit more interesting in the way that PlayStation started to see what their games were going to be. That game hit it off. And then you had, The Last of Us. The Last of Us is exactly where that PlayStation generation completely flipped. And they flipped from making games that were fun and accessible to movie-type games. And then the PlayStation 4, enter the PlayStation 4. Before that, PlayStation games were, on the PlayStation 3, it was a little bit rocky because the PlayStation 3 was just really hard to develop for. It really made things a lot tougher for things to like really, they started doing good. They were good. But I wouldn't say all of them games on PlayStation 3 were masterclass. I liked Uncharted 2. I thought that one was the best one out of the ones on the PlayStation 3 for sure. And God of War, you had God of War, but that was on freaking the PlayStation 2, and it was great. And then they translated that over to PlayStation 3, and wow, believe it or not, that one was pretty good too. Ascension, a lot of people didn't like it. I thought it was fine. It was definitely God of War. Like, it was pretty cool. So they had that. But I think that after The Last of Us, things just completely flipped in PlayStation's head, and they no longer cared about making games that are games. They wanted to take these games to a different level. And so the whole PlayStation 4 generation, we got some, I mean, we got like Bloodborne and some other stuff that were, still in the realm of games. But then every PlayStation first party game started going into these like high production, movie oriented type games that were closer to The Last of Us. And I mean, that's not bad. Like, I'm not complaining about that. But the budgets on these games started ballooning and ballooning and ballooning. So you see, I mean, this is where we're starting to get into the Nintendo cost thing, like with the cartridges. They're getting expensive. The cartridges were holding Nintendo back. They were forcing Nintendo to lose out on our sales and not being able to, spend money on getting other developers for like third-party games and stuff like that. It was hurting Nintendo in a way that they just couldn't compete with the power of Sony with their cheaper games. PlayStation 2 games were still $49. And it still kept going, and PlayStation was able to completely just come out and suck the market out from Sega and Nintendo. And now Nintendo is basically back in a little corner. I mean, their console right after the GameCube was the Wii U. And the Wii U, I mean, it was a fine console. It was fun. The whole family could play it, whatever. And they sold a bunch of those because it was cheap. And the games were cheap, and nobody really cared about the graphics and stuff. And that's another thing about the PlayStation 1. Those graphics were pretty atrocious. I mean, for the most part. Like, I mean, you look at that stuff now and you're like, ooh, gosh, man. But then you look at the Nintendo 64, those games looked amazing. They looked amazing compared to PlayStation 1 games. There just wasn't enough content out there, and it wasn't cheap. And it always felt like you were spending more money. And that's the thing. That's like, people want that value. They want that value. They crave value, and the masses are going to cling to value like nothing else. The diehards, yeah, the people that love these games and stuff are going to keep buying it, but that's going to shrink and shrink and shrink, as the masses, move from Nintendo over to PlayStation. You know what I mean? They moved over to PlayStation. They started playing lots and lots of games. It was cheaper. It felt like they could do more on the PlayStation than they could on the Nintendo. And that's not to say, I mean, the PlayStation delivered solid experiences. I mean, we've got a whole franchise of games like, Final Fantasy, Resident Evil, all of these games that started on the PlayStation, on the original PlayStation. Well, Final Fantasy didn't start on the original PlayStation. That started on like Super Nintendo and Nintendo. But it grew, and that's where it got its massive following, was on the PlayStation. It started to evolve and get better. So that's why we're at the end of the PlayStation 4 generation. And this is the tipping point for PlayStation. Their massive success at the end of the PlayStation 4 generation with games like God of War, Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us 2, all of these games that they brought out, Horizon Zero Dawn, these games that they came out with, and there's massive budgets behind them, and they pushed them and they pushed them, and they did the same with Days Gone. Well, now the expectation for PlayStation first party developers is so freaking high, it's not even funny now. It's not funny, and it's not good for their developers. Like, this unrealistic expectation that these games are going to be the best. That's a lot of work on these PlayStation devs, and like, the only thing that's changed is more money's been thrown at them, and they've got more power in the PlayStation 5. Like, I do pray that these PlayStation devs can overcome this and things will get better, but we got Microsoft out there now that's a powerhouse, like Sony used to be in the PlayStation 1 days, just throwing content at you, boom, 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 just showering you with stuff in Game Pass. And you're getting showered with it. And like, all of it, not all of it's perfect or great or anything, but it's enough to get you by. It's enough to make you feel like this is one freaking heck of a value. And if you don't believe that, then there's something wrong. I watched PlayStation do this to Nintendo and Sega. Like, I grew up in that time. I watched it. I was part of it. I felt the pull to PlayStation from these other consoles. Like, Super Nintendo was amazing. Tell me it wasn't. If you grew up playing Super Nintendo, that console was amazing. It still had mature rating games. It still had enough to keep even the older gamers play it on Nintendo, Super Nintendo. And then Nintendo 64, and it just turned into like a kid game like thing. It didn't appeal to me as I was getting older and becoming, getting older and wanted to play more grown-up games and stuff. That's the effect that Game Pass has on this market right now. PlayStation is so involved with these budgets for these games and trying to ensure that they are the best movie games out there. And they're great. I love them. I'll buy them. I'll play them. Whatever. But the choice to raise the price to $70, to charge us $10 for every single thing that comes out, every upgrade we get for their games, to sit in a room with Activision, EA, what's the other one? Square Enix, Sony, and Take-Two Interactive, and be like, yeah, you know what, guys? We should raise the price to $70. And they were all sitting there, and they're like, what about you, Phil Spencer? What do you think? And he's like, Game Pass, Game Pass, Game Pass. And they're like, all right, we'll do it without him. And now the market's seeing that. Like, they're starting to understand that, hey, man, Microsoft is trying to just bring you value at a good price, at an amazing price. While Sony is like, no, man, we're going to keep making this stuff, and we're going to sell it to you at this price. Well, that might have worked out, and it might have taken them all the way home. But one of them key players fell. Activision, the biggest one, they fell. And that's going to have a rippling effect that's going to pull the rest of them down with it. And if you think I'm joking, look at EA. They just launched Battlefield 2042, and it's a flop. It's a flop. It's garbage. It's probably... That game alone screams, this is why Game Pass matters. This game should have been right on Game Pass, and nobody would have had a problem with it. Tons of people would have played it. It probably would have become a major success. Nobody would have complained about it because it would have been on Game Pass. And it would have been like, oh man, it's mid-trash. You get what I'm saying? These big companies that coalesce together to try to raise the price of gaming for everybody, they're starting to understand, they're starting to feel exactly why Game Pass is going to kick them right in the butt and drag them along kicking and screaming, because there's no other way. There's nothing else for EA to do except for either A, make a free-to-play version of it, or stick that game in Game Pass as fast as they can to try to save face. Now, they came out and they said, oh yeah, we're going to fix it, but they said the same thing with Anthem. They said the exact same thing with Anthem. So that only leaves two more. That leaves Square Enix, that leaves Sony, and then that leaves, Take-Two Interactive. But Take-Two Interactive, they're not even talking about Gran Turismo 6 or Grand Theft Auto 6. No, man, they're bringing you Grand Theft Auto 5 again, and they're probably going to want you to pay $70 for that, or give you an upgrade fee or something along those lines. But they are going to try to milk that as much as they can, because we as gamers have allowed them to do that. We as gamers have allowed them to consistently put these games out, and I mean, like, I'm not saying they're not fun experiences, but with Activision fallen and EA about to fall because of this Battlefield thing, that only leaves those two left, those three left, Sega or Sony and the other two. If Horizon Forbidden West launches and it's a flop, dang man, dang, that would be bad. Square Enix, they're about to drop Forspoken. If this game doesn't hold up and produce a $70 game, that they're asking for it at launch, $70, $69.99. If this game doesn't hold up and produce and provide an experience that's worthy of being called a $70 experience, I mean, the whole last year we watched PlayStation put these games out for $70, and not a lot of them held up, to be completely honest with you. I don't think they did. So when you look at that and you look at the future and what Microsoft is bringing to the table with Game Pass, yeah, PlayStation could seriously be in trouble this generation. And that's not me just being like, oh yeah, well, Game Pass is great. No, the Game Pass gives you enough value that you're like, wow, man, like, that's not bad. I can mow a lawn and pay $15. I got to go get a job and buy that game from Sony for $70. And if I don't like it, oh man, I got to take it back to Game Pass and I get half my money. You lose half your money on a $70 game. That is almost 3 months worth of Game Pass and playing hundreds of games. And that's what I'm saying. Like, the value is so strong on the Microsoft side right now that if they come out next month and they're like, oh yeah, Dying Light 2 free on Game Pass, or Elden Ring free on Game Pass, that's definitely gonna have an impact that's gonna be felt around the world. Like, I promise you, Forbidden West is not going to do much to get around that. I liked Forbidden West. I thought it was great. But there's a thing, man. I seen somebody's comment the other day, them comparing Forbidden West to like The Witcher 3, and I wouldn't do that. I would not do that. Do not put Horizon Forbidden West in that spot. Don't do that, because Witcher 3, you could play that game multiple times and it's different every time. This is a PlayStation game you're talking about. It's got one story and one outcome. I mean, yeah, The Witcher has that too, but there's so much other interesting side content in The Witcher that's far better than just getting through a one story and getting out. I've played The Witcher a couple times now, and I plan on playing it again when they upgrade it. Don't do that. Do not compare this. Do not compare Horizon Forbidden West to The Witcher 3. I encourage you not to. Witcher 3 and Death Stranding have something really great in common. The more you play them, the better they get. So I don't know if I would put Horizon Forbidden West in that category yet. I'm going to play through it. I'm going to give you my honest opinion on it. I really love the first game, so I think it would be really hard for the second game to mess that up. But as we're getting into this, I just want you guys to know that this could be where we see PlayStation nosedive, and we see Microsoft rise to be the new leader of gaming. And that's where I see things going. And it's not something that I'm against PlayStation at all. Like, I love PlayStation. I love my PlayStation experience. But I think they've gotten way too cocky. And I think Microsoft's had more than enough of being kicked around to now that they've actually got Microsoft backing Xbox 100%. This is a different game. There's a lot more money on the Microsoft side. They could literally buy and sell every single one of these companies and not bat an eye. We don't necessarily want that in the gaming space. We do want competition. But when you've got big makers like EA and Square and all these guys making mistakes and stumbling to try to cash in on these games to get shareholders money, and then you got Microsoft being like, yeah, man, we'll buy Activision. Yeah, you don't got to put games out every year anymore. Be creative. Build what you guys want to build. Let's fill Game Pass. Let's make Game Pass an amazing experience. Because that's what Microsoft's seeing. All they care about right now is Game Pass and the Xbox ecosystem. They care about the Xbox ecosystem. They'll support that natively, but they care about Game Pass. Whatever they can get and put into Game Pass adds value to Game Pass. If it's 100, mediocre games and 2 or 3, solid games every 6 months or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, you didn't have to pay full price for those mediocre games, but they were still fun. They were still all right. They entertained you. They took up some of your time. Are they a Sony first-party movie exclusive? No, they're not. They're not. They're definitely not. But I have never played a Sony game twice and had the same impact I had the first time. So that's why people call them one and dones. Yeah, you can play them a couple times, but you will never receive the same impact twice. And that's why I encourage everybody. Just because there's footage out there with Horizon Forbidden West right now, avoid it. Avoid it, because you don't want to see any of that. You want to experience this game you want to experience this game alone, by yourself, the first time, and really take in the world and the environment, because you're not going to get a second chance. If you waste it all watching like gameplay and everything else, you're not going to receive what that game is mainly going to be about. So that's my thoughts. That's how I feel about this situation. And I know I've been a little bit, getting into the whole like little fanboy thing and stuff, and it's really not about that, guys. It's really not about that. It's about what I see happening and why I see that this is Xbox's time to shine. It really is. They've put this plan in motion. They've been thinking about it, and it is time for Microsoft to take the lead. It is. And I promise you, I'm not an Xbox fanboy, but I do believe in what they're doing. So it makes it easier to talk about it. I do believe in it. Just like I believed in PlayStation when they first came on the scene back in 1994. I believed in their vision, but now I believe in Microsoft's vision. and I'm a gamer. That's all it really boils down to. I'm a gamer, and I want to play more games, not less games. I want to be able to experience things that are truly creative, and I feel like Game Pass is definitely going to give you a lot more game and a lot more value and a lot more creativity like we used to have back in the 90s when they weren't sitting there trying to feed a machine that was a shareholder thing. If the more Microsoft owns, the more they can shield those companies. As long as people are buying into Game Pass and they're showing growth and it's sustainable, they'll be able to build things that we never thought they could build. And they've got tech that's going to be able to deliver AI. Microsoft is the future. It is the future of gaming. And the success of Game Pass, the more successful it is, the better gaming is going to be. A lot of people are like, oh, yeah, I mean, you can say that the games on Game Pass right now are trash all you want. You can say, oh, Microsoft buys all these companies and they ain't putting nothing out. No new IP or nothing. It's going to take, I mean, yeah, that might take some time, but that's not their main goal. I mean, if they wanted to put out new IP, I'm pretty sure they got enough devs to put out some new IP already. They're trying to build games to put on Game Pass. And they need some of those known names, like Call of Duty, stuff like that, stuff that's going to, instantly add value to Game Pass. But there's other things going on. There's other devs at Microsoft in the background making stuff that we don't know about. Like there is. Don't worry about that. What you need to worry about right now is making sure you buy the best console that's going to deliver the best gaming experience to you at the best value. Or, and I mean that, best value. Either you want lots of games to play, or you're perfectly okay with paying for a single game for a single playthrough that is going to probably rock your freaking world. Like it's going to be great. But at the end of the day, then you're stuck with that, and there's no real reason to really play through that again. So that's my little rant. That's the rise and fall of PlayStation, how I see it, and how I am thinking that things are going to coalesce by the end of this generation. And I feel like Microsoft is going to be victorious. And I don't know if I necessarily felt this way 100% before the Activision deal, but I do now. And the stumbling of EA with Battlefield, you mark my words, man. I bet EA and Take-Two are going to end up being Xbox studios as well. So that sucks, but I mean, it does suck, but it doesn't suck. It does, but it doesn't, because then we'll finally be able to see those guys be truly creative again and build the games that we used to love, like BioWare and all these other guys. I hope it does come back to that, because I want to experience good games again. So if you like this content and you want to see more of it, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And we did update the membership on here. You can grab your battle pass today. There's 4 levels, so if you want to support this channel, hit that, go ahead and join, and I'll see you guys in the next one.